Yes! I've finally done it. I don't care. Like, comment, subscribe, share. What comment, subscribe, share, like this video. I've done it. I figured out how to get the most stat points out of a Pokemon, defensive wise, and add bulk to all your sweepers. And yes! I got this one. Whew. I'm sorry for acting a bit crazy right now, but I've just spent the last couple hours just all night running numbers, running math, making sure I got hopefully everything right. If it's wrong, I'm terribly sorry right now, but I've figured out the magical formula for Pokemon. And it actually was right there to begin with, and it's really not common knowledge. I think other people have discovered this, but they really haven't tested it the way I have, and they really haven't understood like how to apply this, because a lot of people understand that EVs are essentially you go 252, 252, done. You might split it up a bit more for defensive Pokemon, but I have come up with the ultimate way of making this work, and yes, I'm so psyched for it. So, let's go and flip the switch over to my stat calculators where I can discuss how this works. So before I go into the hard math really quick, this is like the rough idea that I have. If you can actually come up with like a better, more hard and solid formula because you understand math more, that'd be great, and I would love to like do an update video. But right now this is the concept and showing like how to fine-tune a Pokemon. I don't have like the exact numbers, but it's something close to finding that Pokemon's hidden average and then scaling towards that average for hit points and defenses, and I'm going to explain that here. Okay, there are a lot of dynamics to this, and I hope it all makes sense. First off, this is kind of the evidence that was showing me that we have an idea here, that this is actually this actually means something, that we can figure out the ratio between hit points and defense and how much damage you take. You can start understanding the best way of balancing out your Pokemon. So if we look right here, we have 273 hit points, 251 special defense. We're taking about 28.9% of our health from an Ice Beam from Greninja. We're not worrying about Dark Pulse right now because Stab is kind of messes with this. But if we look at Hydro Pump, we're going to watch something cool happen. So if I take 44 EVs from here, and then I pop it into Special Defense, we'll see that these numbers actually become the same. That we have the same amount of hit points, same amount of Special Defense, and we're taking the same percentage from Ice Beam. It also works if you add on to it, that if we put the other 44 points here, take it away, we have 29% onto Ice Beam. This shows that as long as the average between the hit points and defense is being kept, the damage is being kept, which shows that there's no really weighted scale, that hit points don't give you more of an effective hit points than defense, as much as I thought that they did. That, 1 point of hit points and 1 point of defense essentially means the same damage as long as it's split evenly. Now, it starts getting complicated when you have to deal with other things like base stats. Let's take Arceus. All of its base stats are the same. However, hit points is weighted higher. So technically you're going to have more damage or you're going to have more health, which means you're trying to put your points in defense to catch up with that health. So if we put, let's say, trying to bring up my number because I have a notepad over here of what it is. So if we have 168 EVs into hit points, and then we also have 168 into, or not 252, 168 into defense, you kind of see that we're taking 28.6% of Arceus' health. Now, what we need to do after that is we need to kind of average it out again because the Pokemon has the same base stats, so the EVs are going to be met the same. Now, if we put 252 here, and then we put, 1 second while I grab that number again, 126 here, it's still 28.6. And if you just go and flip these around, we have 27.6. So now that we were like trying to break this up to where the EVs are the same, you have to look at what makes it better. Now here's the thing, since hit points are higher, even though it's the same base stats, putting more EVs into the defensive value here and less into the hit points is what gives us slightly less damage. We're taking 1% less damage of our health. Actually, it's like 1.2%, so it's 27.6. But if we go back to the other one, which was at 252 and then 126, it was 28.6. So yes, this is starting to show that if you try to weight it to catch up to those hit points, you're going to start taking less damage. And this is really good and crucial when you're trying to look into Pokemon and stat calculation. So here we have Garchomp. Now, this is an interesting Garchomp set because I have Garchomp going against Garchomp, and we look at Earthquake right now. It's doing 38% with this weird spread of 96, 252, 156. Now, if we were to just kind of combine this defense into hit points, remember we're at 38 right now. So if we just take this, turn it into a 0, and then we turn this into 252, we're actually at 40.7. So we're taking 2.7% less damage from distributing this really well. Now, what that means is that if we go and look at, I'm trying to find my numbers here because I do have it on a separate notepad, and every time I click away, it clicks out of the notepad. So sorry about that. If we just go and put 156 here again, and then we put 0 here again, we're at that 40.6. So that means we essentially, just by, instead of putting 252 hit points into health, since the health is already higher and we need that defense to catch up to the health and bring that average higher, we have defense. Now we have these 90, I believe it was 96. We have 96 free EVs to put into Garchomp instead of just kind of dumping it into defense, which means that if we put it into special defense, we're catching up to that health. So now we're getting more effective special defense and more effective health in that special defense. And even if we did put it into health, that's 96 EVs. That's, I believe, 24 more hit points that I would have for a special attack while also being bulkier in defense. So it's kind of like if you want to balance it out, you put those points here. But if you really just want to be better defensively, you put this here, and it's getting free special defense points because you're splitting it up well enough to where by putting into defense, your effective defense is already higher. So now you're getting free hit points, which make your defense higher, and they make you endure more special attacks. Hopefully that made sense. Like, that's kind of the big thing right here, is that when applied to a Pokemon that doesn't have even base stats like Arceus, or Pokemon like Alakazam that has exactly even stats, you start to aim for the higher number, and it rewards you very well. So I also do have we're also looking at Shuckle and Blissey. These Pokemon are also very good examples because these Pokemon are on opposite ends of the spectrum. So if we look at Shuckle, it has huge defenses, low hit points. We look at Blissey, huge hit points, low defense. And I was running this against a Garchomp. I have some of the stats here. I'm just going to read it off of my notepad though. So first off, Blissey with 714 hit points and 119 defense, so maxed out. It has an average of 416.5 between these stats. And then it's taking 45.3% of its hit points from an Earthquake. So that means, like, with that even edge stats, so we're looking back at this Garchomp against Blissey, it's taking 45.3 as a minimum on the Earthquake. Okay, so if we look at Shuckle, however, Shuckle, we do have to balance out its stats a bit more, but if we get Shuckle to the point where it's at, we get an Impish Nature as well, we need the defensive. The idea is I'm bringing up the averages to show you how close, if you can bring the average close enough to having the hit points and defense be the same, it rewards you more. So we need to tone this down to 589. So if we tone this down to 589 and we put the EVs here, this is effectively this Shuckle built like a Blissey. So we have the same total amount of points to put into, which means that, hold on, let me do some math here, that if we add 714 plus 119, we're at 833 points to use between our defense and hit points. Now, we can't build a Pokemon, so we have to work with what we're given. Now, this Pokemon obviously has a huge gap right here. 714 versus 119. That's a very low ratio. Shuckle, however, is 244 and 589. So instead of bringing the defense up, bringing the defense down to catch up to the hit points in this situation, and we're matched on Blissey's. So remember, Blissey took 45% of its health from that Earthquake. Shuckle only takes 27.4 from that Earthquake, which means that even though it's the same amount of stats, that we're dealing with the same stat total between Shuckle and Blissey, Shuckle takes less damage because its stats are closer to an average, that there isn't as much of a disparity between them. And that just shows that when you're building a Pokemon, you need to aim for it. Shuckle and Blissey kind of proved this along with the Arceus and this whole Alakazam thing, but then Garchomp applies it. So now it's kind of like looking for those free EVs that are scattered about. Sure, you can still run a lot of the Pokemon the same way that you do, But by doing this, it's very good for bruiser Pokemon and tank Pokemon. This most likely isn't going to work with sweepers since most of them will be one-hit KO'd anyways. But this is looking at the Pokemon that are meant to endure hits and meant to dish out other hits. Garchomp is a good bulky Pokemon. Tyranitar, Gyarados, Snorlax, a lot of the tanky Pokemon, if you take a lot of extra time to balance them properly and run damage calculators with a, sorry, I just got a little caught up right there. If you run damage calculators with a set amount of damage, you can start to tune that Pokemon towards EVs get the most damage. Sure, it might be 5 or 6 points of damage, but that could make or break a game. That could make or break a setup. And it's also just that your Pokemon is more efficient from it. So I know this was a long video, but it's a lot of proof and practicality that, you know, if you're running your Garchomp with 252 hit points, 252 attack, and let's say it's Jolly Scarfed, well, you're actually getting a weaker Garchomp than if you did 96, 252, 156. That you're going to be more enduring for defensive attacks this way, you're going to have more effective special defense, and you're not sacrificing on your overall hit points and attack. So it's actually a stronger Pokemon that way. Now, that's a lot of points we're dealing with. That's 96 EVs. That's 24 points of stats that you're losing just by not running it optimally. So there are a lot of little math things that you can do in here. And again, there's a lot of other things. If we go and look on Pokemon Showdown, that also when you're dealing with it, you also have to incorporate the defense and base stat totals with the nature. The nature kind of tweaks this around, because if I put this into an impish nature, we'd have some problems because I'm not getting a lot of points. So let's look at 306 on special defense and 130 on defense. So if we go with a special defense nature, we gain 20, or this goes down to 107, and then this goes up to 336. So the idea here is that we're losing, or we're gaining 30 points, but we were losing 23. Or yeah, we were only gaining 23 here. So there's 7 points missing just from choosing the wrong nature. So that just kind of shows how, oh wait, we didn't want this. Whoops, never mind. Whoops, I actually chose the wrong nature. 1 second. Let's do calm. My bad. Actually, it's 119. So there's 11 points gained from a defensive nature, but there's 30 points gained from a special defensive nature. I thought those points didn't look up. That way we're losing 19 points. We're actually losing 19 points by choosing the wrong nature. With Shuckle, it's even bigger. That, you know, if we didn't have like a defensive nature in here, we're losing a ton of points. So let's look at just the base right here is 496. Now if we go into that special defense nature again, 545. So we're gaining a lot of stats just by putting this in the right place. And that's kind of another thing that adds to this, that if you want to distribute a Pokemon, you have to take the flat EVs into consideration. That EVs give you 63 points regardless. That this goes from 56 to 119. This only goes from 336. Well, let's go and tone down the hit points. 336 to 405. Now, this is where it starts getting really crazy, because that 405 is going to be just a lot, like that's still the 63, but it's not as much of a percentual impact. That going from, you know, that to that isn't as big as is almost doubling, actually going more than double from just putting the EVs here. So it does add a lot of dynamics that when you're getting into natures, when you're getting to EV tuning, there's a lot of technical aspects here, but if you balance it right and you kind of use this as a guide to aim for that middle ground, that you are looking at a potential of gaining just a couple more points of defense, a lot more effective health, that, you know, some Pokemon could have untapped potential of up to 20 hit points total, and even more EVs that could go into offensive capabilities because they're not being used right. I'm probably going to have to go and rework some of my sets because of this. I don't think it's massive, but it could make or break a game. That if you survive with 2 hit points with the new set, that means you would have gotten knocked out on the old set, and it could cost you the game. So this was crazy, this was long, this was big, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Changing the game, and I hope you all have a nice day.